Hi everyone, I 34F. Never thought I'd end up writing something like this, but here we are. My husband David 36M, and I have been together for over a decade, married for 8 years, with 2 kids, 7 and 4. From the outside, people always told us we looked like the perfect couple. We had the house, the family vacations, the holiday cards where everyone's wearing matching pajamas. Friends would say they envied our stability. I used to believe it too. But lately something has shifted. It started small, barely noticeable things. David began acting like the very routines that used to comfort him were now suffocating. He'd sigh when I reminded him about soccer practice schedules, or roll his eyes when I asked him to pick up milk on his way home. He joked once that living with me was like living with a walking to-do list. It was meant to be funny, but it stung. He started nitpicking too. The way I folded towels. The fact that I planned dinners a week ahead. He even mocked me for writing grocery lists, which I've always done. "Do you ever do anything without a checklist, Julia?" he said one night, half laughing, half serious. It was such a strange thing to fight about, but it left me wondering when being dependable became something to resent. Then there were the work trips. David's job has always been demanding, but travel wasn't usually part of it. All of a sudden, he had out-of-town meetings that came up last minute, and urgent client dinners that ran late. Sometimes he'd come home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his usual, and when I asked about it he'd shrug and say, "Probably someone at the office sprayed too much." I wanted to believe him, so I did. For a while. His phone became another battleground. He used to leave it on the counter without a second thought, but now it was glued to his side. Locked. Face down. Once, when it buzzed while he was in the shower, I reached for it instinctively, thinking it might be work, and he came running out dripping wet, snatching it from my hands with this wild look in his eyes. He muttered something about confidential client info, but I remember standing there, heart pounding, thinking, that was not a normal reaction. At night he stopped reaching for me. The man who used to curl around me like I was his anchor now lay stiff and distant, scrolling endlessly until I fell asleep. When I kissed him goodnight, it felt like kissing a mask. I told myself maybe he was stressed. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was hitting some kind of midlife wall. But deep down, that gnawing feeling started to grow quiet, persistent, impossible to ignore. Something was off. I just didn't know yet how off it really was. I wish I could say I stumbled across the truth in some dramatic way, but in reality, it was a string of small accidental cracks that finally broke open. The first real slip happened when David left for a 2-day conference in another city. I noticed he only packed his overnight bag, just a few shirts and jeans. No laptop, no folders, nothing work-related at all. When I asked about it, he laughed it off, saying, "They're providing everything there, babe. It's more networking than actual meetings." Something about the casual tone made my stomach twist. While he was gone, I tried not to spiral. I distracted myself with the kids, with chores, with Netflix droning in the background. But then I went to toss his jacket into the wash, and that's when I found it. Tucked inside the inner pocket. A folded piece of sketch paper, rough at the edges, smudged with graphite. It was a drawing of David's face. And beneath it, a line in handwriting I didn't recognize. "You make my world less gray." My knees nearly gave out. My husband, who hadn't looked me in the eye during dinner for weeks, had someone out there sketching him like a muse and writing him poetic little love notes. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it was old, maybe it was nothing. But the paper smelled faintly of paint and cigarettes, scents that definitely didn't belong to me. I put it back where I found it. My hands were shaking so badly I almost ripped it. I decided to wait to see if he'd slip again. And he did. A week later, I was cleaning out the car before taking the kids to soccer when I found an earring wedged between the seat and the console. Not mine. I don't even wear dangly earrings, and this one was a long silver feather with turquoise at the tip. Very bohemian. My style is more practical, mom chic. When I asked David about it later, his reaction was almost laughable. He gave me this exaggerated "oh wow" expression and said, "Oh, that must be Karen's from work." I gave her a ride home after a meeting. Karen, by the way, is 57, wears pearls, and hates car rides because she gets motion sick. He didn't even bother to make the lie believable. That night, after he fell asleep, I went through his wallet. Tucked behind his credit cards was a coffee shop punch card, 9 stamps, one away from a free drink. Only problem? The cafe wasn't anywhere near his office. It was in the arts district, a place we never go. On the back of the card was another scribble in the same handwriting as the sketch. Next time, my treat. I lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy like someone had piled bricks on it. I wanted to scream, to shake him awake and demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Because deep down I needed to hear what he would say when cornered. I needed to see what kind of man my husband really was when the mask came off. I couldn't take it anymore. The notes, the earring, the late nights, it was all too loud to ignore. So one Friday evening after the kids were asleep, I decided I wasn't going to play detective anymore. I wanted the truth straight from him, even if it shattered everything. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling his phone like always. I sat down across from him and slid the sketch across the coffee table, the one I'd pulled from his jacket pocket. His face drained of color so fast it was almost comical. "David," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "when were you planning to tell me you've already left?" He blinked, then laughed, a short, nervous bark. "Julia, come on. It's just a drawing. A coworker doodled it as a joke. You're blowing this way out of proportion." My hands were shaking, but I pushed forward. "And the earring in your car? And the coffee shop card? And the constant trips to the arts district?" That's when the lies started spilling. First, he swore the earring belonged to Karen from accounting. I told him Karen wears pearls and hates driving. He backpedaled and said, "Fine, it was one of the interns. She asked for a ride, it was nothing." When I pressed him about the cafe, he smirked and said, "So what if I grab coffee somewhere else? Since when do I need your permission?" Every word felt like a knife. He wasn't even trying to make it sound believable anymore. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Julia, you're paranoid. You read too many trashy blogs. You're imagining things because you're bored." I almost laughed at the audacity. Me bored? I run our household, raise our kids, keep everything afloat while he plays make-believe with some paint-stained mistress. I told him I wanted honesty. Just once I wanted him to drop the act. He stared at me, then leaned back on the couch with this smug little smile. "Okay, you want the truth? Fine. I like the attention. I like feeling alive again. You make everything so routine." I didn't mean for it to go this far, but Marin. He froze when he realized he'd slipped her name. That was it. The mask had cracked wide open. And yet, even then, instead of apologizing, he doubled down. He had the nerve to say, "But it's not like I don't love you. I do. You're safe. She's exciting. Can't you understand that?" My whole body went cold. That's the moment I realized my husband wasn't just a cheater. He was a liar, a coward, and a man who thought he could have both worlds without consequences. When he said her name, Marin, it was like someone smashed a glass inside my chest. Sharp edges everywhere, cutting deeper every time I breathed. I remember just staring at him, trying to process the fact that my husband, the man who once cried when I walked down the aisle, was sitting there casually comparing me to his mistress like we were items on a menu. First came the rage. White hot, shaking my hands, rage. I wanted to scream, throw something, demand to know how long, where, why. But then the anger drained as quickly as it came, leaving this hollow ache. I felt small, betrayed, disposable. The worst part wasn't even the cheating. It was how little remorse he showed. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. He just sat there, acting like I was overreacting, like my pain was an inconvenience. He even had the audacity to say, "Julia, don't make this bigger than it is. Plenty of people have flings. It doesn't have to ruin us." That sentence broke me in a way I can't describe. To him, my marriage vows, our family, my trust, all of it was reduced to a fling. The days after that confrontation blurred together. I'd wake up in the morning, see him pretending to sip his coffee like nothing happened, and feel physically sick. At night, when he crawled into bed, I'd inch away from him, tears soaking my pillow while he snored beside me like it was any other day. I stopped eating properly. My stomach was in knots. Even my kids noticed. My 7-year-old asked, "Mom, why are you sad all the time?" That broke me harder than anything David ever said. I wanted to shield them from the truth, but children feel tension even when words aren't spoken. Then came the sadness. The crushing kind that makes you wonder if you'll ever laugh again. I kept replaying everything in my head, the business trips, The eye rolls, the way he pulled away from me in bed. All the pieces clicked together. And I realized I'd been living in a story where I was the only one who still believed in us. But slowly something shifted. Beneath the grief and anger, a quiet strength started to flicker. I thought, if he can betray me this easily, maybe I don't want to be the one holding everything together anymore. And that thought, terrifying as it was, felt like the first step toward freedom. After the confrontation, David acted like nothing had really changed. He still kissed me on the cheek before leaving the house, still tossed his socks on the floor for me to pick up, still scrolled on his phone every night. It was surreal, like he thought if he ignored the fallout it would all just reset. But I couldn't unhear her name. I couldn't unsee the sketch, the notes, the earring. Every time he touched me I recoiled. Every time he spoke, I wondered if the words were just another layer of lies. I tried once more to have an honest conversation, for the sake of closure. I asked him directly if he wanted to end things with her. He laughed, shook his head and said, "Julia, you're being dramatic. I'm not leaving you and I'm not leaving her. This works for me." That was the moment the last thread snapped. He didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as an anchor, someone to keep the house running while he chased thrills on the side. So I made my decision. Quietly, methodically, much like the lists he mocked me for. I contacted a lawyer. I gathered documents, bank statements, and messages. I spoke to a therapist, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was standing on solid ground again. When I told him I wanted a separation, he was stunned. He said, "You're really going to throw away our marriage over a mistake?" I reminded him. He was the one who threw it away the second he stepped into someone else's bed and lied about it. He begged. He threatened. He promised. But it was too late. I wasn't the same woman who had doubted her gut and accepted his excuses. Now, weeks later, I'm still hurting. I won't lie, it's not easy. There are nights I cry myself to sleep. But there are also mornings where I wake up, make coffee, and feel a flicker of peace knowing I chose dignity over deception. Conclusion. If anyone reading this is in a similar situation, please listen to your gut. Don't let someone gaslight you into believing you're paranoid or dramatic. A partner who truly loves you won't make you question your worth. David wanted safety at home and excitement on the side. I'm done being his safety net. I'm choosing myself, and that is the scariest and bravest decision I've ever made.